Imagine a woman who achieved everything she ever dreamed of. She married a wealthy man, joined the elite, and finally reached the status she always desired. But what happens when that accomplishment turns into a trap, where her insecurity drives her to humiliate others to feel superior? Claire, a woman who has made it to the top, decides to humiliate a simple waiter at a gala to reaffirm her superiority. But what she doesn't know is that this waiter holds a secret that will turn her world upside down. Claire Whitman stood before the ornate mirror in her lavishly decorated bedroom, the soft glow of candlelight illuminating the contours of her face. She adjusted the straps of her designer gown, a stunning creation that hugged her figure perfectly and shimmered with every subtle movement. Each intricate bead and stitch whispered promises of elegance and status, the very thing she craved. As she practiced her charming smile, she couldn't help but reflect on the path that had led her here. "Remember who you are, Claire," she muttered to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not just any woman, you're the wife of Richard Whitman." The reminder felt both empowering and suffocating. Her thoughts drifted back to her middle-class origins, the small town where she had grown up, and the sacrifices she made to marry into wealth. She recalled the late nights spent studying, the relentless drive to impress, and the countless times she had to hide her insecurities behind a facade of sophistication. "Just a few more hours," she murmured, straightening her posture. Tonight was the charity gala, an event that promised to be a showcase of the elite, a chance for her to solidify her place among them. Despite the glittering world she now inhabited, the insecurities still haunted her. Was she truly accepted, or was she merely a trophy on Richard's arm? As she descended the grand staircase of their mansion, its opulence enveloped her like a warm embrace. The air was thick with anticipation, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses reverberating through the halls. She stepped into the ballroom, where chandeliers sparkled like stars, casting a golden hue over the elegantly dressed guests. Claire inhaled deeply, the scent of expensive perfume and gourmet hors d'oeuvres filling the air. This was her domain, at least, that's what she told herself. "Claire, darling, you look exquisite," a voice called out, pulling her from her reverie. It was Veronica, one of her closest friends, draped in a gown that seemed to rival Claire's own. They exchanged pleasantries and moved deeper into the crowd, where conversations buzzed around them like bees in a garden. They mingled with the elite, Claire's eyes scanning the room for influential figures. She overheard snippets of conversations, whispers of business deals and scandalous gossip, each one a reminder of the status she yearned to solidify. "Did you hear about the new investment in tech startups?" one guest said, while another chimed in, "I heard she's dating that billionaire." Quite the catch. The atmosphere was intoxicating, yet Claire felt a tension lurking beneath the surface. Each laugh seemed to hide a competition, each compliment laced with an unspoken challenge. She clutched her champagne flute tighter, the crystal cool against her palm, as she navigated through the sea of well-dressed strangers. It was then, amidst the glitter and glamour, that Claire's gaze landed on a familiar figure. Thomas, the waiter from the upscale restaurant where she often dined. He moved gracefully through the crowd, serving drinks with a quiet confidence that made her pause. There was something about him that intrigued her, an aura that suggested he was more than just a servant in this display of wealth. With an air of superiority, Claire decided to engage him. After all, asserting her status as a member of the elite was crucial. She approached him, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and flashed a smile that she hoped would convey both charm and authority. "Thomas, isn't it?" she said, tilting her head slightly. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. I suppose even waiters get to rub elbows with the rich occasionally." He looked up, his expression calm, almost amused. "It's quite an honor to serve at such an event, Claire. The company is certainly interesting." His words held a weight that caught her off guard, sending a ripple of unease through her. "Interesting? Is that all?" she replied, feigning laughter. "I suppose you see a lot from the sidelines." "Perhaps," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But sometimes, The sidelines offer a clearer view of the game. Claire felt a flicker of irritation. Who did he think he was, speaking to her like that? She quickly masked her surprise with a wave of disdain, turning her attention back to the crowd. Yet, as Thomas walked away, a nagging curiosity lingered in her mind. Who was this waiter who dared to challenge her? The night stretched ahead, filled with potential revelations and a growing tension she couldn't quite place. Claire Whitman approached Thomas with a blend of arrogance and curiosity, her designer gown shimmering under the crystal chandeliers of the gala. She wore a condescending smile, the kind that had served her well in the high-stakes world of social climbing. "How quaint to see someone like you at an event like this," she remarked, her tone laced with sarcasm. Thomas paused for a moment, his expression unreadable. He held a tray of flutes filled with sparkling champagne, the bubbles rising like the tension between them. "It's a charity event, after all. Everyone is welcome," he replied, his voice calm and steady. There was a hint of something deeper in his eyes, a flicker of defiance that caught Claire off guard. Her friends, standing a few paces behind her, exchanged glances, their eyebrows raised in surprise at Thomas's composed demeanor. One of them, a blonde socialite named Jessica, leaned closer to Claire and whispered, "Can you believe he actually spoke back to you?" "Well, he seems to think he belongs here," Claire shot back, but her voice lacked conviction. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, and she felt a shift in the dynamic. Thomas continued to hold her gaze, unflinching. "You might be surprised by who belongs where," he said, the corners of his mouth turning upward slightly, almost in a smirk. "And who's really just pretending." Claire felt her cheeks flush, not entirely from embarrassment but from a sudden rush of intrigue. She had approached him to assert her superiority, yet here he was, subtly challenging her perspective. "You really think you understand the elite?" she asked, feigning laughter. "I understand more than you might think," Thomas replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "Every day, I see the masks people wear. Some are more than they appear, and others, well, they're just good at hiding." Claire's heart raced at his words. There was a depth to Thomas that she hadn't expected. Suddenly, her carefully constructed defenses felt fragile. "And what do you think I'm hiding?" she asked, taking a step closer, her voice lowering. "Perhaps your insecurities," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "Ambition can be a double-edged sword, you know. It can elevate you or consume you." Claire's friends were now whispering amongst themselves, their eyes darting between her and Thomas. Jessica, ever the gossiper, couldn't resist a jab. "I think you've met your match, Claire. Should we fetch the exit sign?" But Claire wasn't ready to retreat. Instead, she felt a strange sense of fascination. "You don't know anything about me," she shot back, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "Maybe not," Thomas conceded, "but I know enough to see that you're striving for acceptance in a world that often values appearance over substance." His words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. Claire, usually so quick with a retort, found herself momentarily speechless. There was a flicker of doubt in her mind, a nagging thought that perhaps her pursuit of status had come at a cost she hadn't fully acknowledged. With a forced smile, she turned away from him, desperate to regain her composure. "Well, it's been enlightening, but I should catch up with my friends," she said, her tone flippant. But as she walked away, the weight of their exchange lingered. As Claire rejoined her group, she felt their stares, a mix of curiosity and judgment. "What was that about?" Jessica asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, nothing," Claire replied, but the truth was, her encounter with Thomas had shaken her. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was more than just a waiter, perhaps someone who had seen the world from a perspective she had yet to grasp. "Are you okay?" another friend, Mark, inquired, sensing her unease. "Of course," Claire said, forcing a laugh. "Just a little too much champagne, I suppose." But in her heart, she knew it was more than that. The seed of curiosity Thomas had planted began to grow, intertwining with her ambition and stirring something deep within her. As the gala continued around her, glittering with laughter and superficiality, Claire found herself glancing back at Thomas, who was now engaged in a conversation with another guest. There was an aura about him, a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the pretentiousness of her own circle. For the first time in a long while, Claire felt a pang of doubt about her relentless quest for status. What if, beneath the glitz and glamour, there was a different kind of success she had yet to understand? Claire stood at the edge of the gala's grand ballroom, swirling her champagne in a crystal flute while absorbing the latest revelations about Thomas. She had overheard a conversation between two guests, one of whom casually mentioned that Thomas had been involved in groundbreaking tech ventures. The words echoed in her mind, intertwining with her earlier encounter with him. Intrigued yet skeptical, Claire felt a surge of determination to uncover the truth about the enigmatic waiter. Groundbreaking tech ventures, she muttered to herself, momentarily lost in thought. She glanced across the room, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for Thomas among the elegantly dressed elites. What could a waiter possibly know about that world? The thought struck her as both amusing and infuriating. She resolved to investigate further, to peel away the layers of his humble facade. Meanwhile, Thomas moved gracefully between tables, a warm smile gracing his lips as he served hors d'oeuvres and poured drinks. The laughter and chatter of the guests flowed around him like a vibrant tapestry. Yet beneath the surface, he reflected on his choices, his journey through various roles in life that had led him to this moment. Each experience, whether as a waiter or a tech entrepreneur, had offered him a unique perspective on human nature and the stark contrasts between wealth and humility. People often forget that this job isn't about status, he mused quietly to himself as he delivered a tray of drinks to a table filled with influential investors. It's a chance to see the world through different eyes. He noted how some guests treated him with indifference, while others engaged with him genuinely, seeking stories and insights about the life he led. There was a certain power in that, he realized, a power that came from understanding the nuances of different social strata. As Claire continued to observe Thomas from a distance, she felt a growing unease within herself. The confidence she had worn like armor began to crack. She approached one of her close friends, Sarah, who stood nearby, elegantly sipping her drink. "Have you heard anything about that waiter, Thomas?" Claire asked, her voice laced with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "I've heard whispers that he's more than just a waiter, Claire. There are rumors about his involvement in some tech startups. You might want to reconsider how you view him." Claire's heart raced at Sarah's words. "Really? A waiter who's involved in tech? It sounds ridiculous. He's just playing a part." She couldn't shake the feeling of superiority that had been instilled in her over the years, a belief that people like her were destined to rise above the rest. "Don't be so quick to judge," Sarah advised gently, her tone almost pleading. "You know how appearances can be deceiving. What if he's genuinely talented? Sometimes the most brilliant minds don't fit the mold we expect." Claire rolled her eyes, dismissing Sarah's words. "It's easy to romanticize the underdog, but you know how this world works. Status and connections matter." "True, but character matters too," Sarah countered, her gaze steady on Claire. "I think you should talk to him. You might be surprised by what you find." Claire's mind raced as she processed Sarah's advice. The conflict within her grew, battling her ingrained beliefs against a burgeoning curiosity about Thomas. The gala was filled with people, yet she felt isolated, trapped in her own perceptions of success. As she watched Thomas engage with a group of guests, effortlessly commanding their attention, a flicker of doubt crept into her heart. Perhaps there was more to him than met the eye. "What if he really is different?" she whispered under her breath, barely audible. "What if he's not just a waiter?" As the evening wore on, Claire found herself torn between her ambition and an inexplicable urge to seek the truth about Thomas. The world of wealth and status began to feel suffocating, and the possibility of genuine connection shimmered on the horizon like a distant star. In that moment, she realized that confronting her own biases might be the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of herself and the people around her. As the evening wore on, the grand ballroom sparkled with chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests. Claire Whitman stood by the edge of the dance floor, her champagne flute delicately cradled in her hand, watching as Thomas moved among the crowd. He was no longer just a waiter to her. He was an enigma, effortlessly navigating the conversations with guests who greeted him with respect and admiration. Claire felt a pang of jealousy twist in her stomach as she observed how easily Thomas seemed to command the attention of the elite. "What is it with him?" Claire muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she watched him share a laugh with an important venture capitalist. "He's just a waiter." Her friend, Sarah, who had been standing beside her, raised an eyebrow. "You're really going to hold on to that? He seems to know everyone here." "Doesn't matter," Claire replied, trying to sound indifferent, though the tension in her voice betrayed her. "He's still serving drinks." "You're acting like it's a crime to work in service," Sarah countered, her tone serious. "Maybe you should take a moment to think about why you feel this way." Claire took a sip of her champagne, the bubbles tickling her nose, but her mind was racing. The truth was, she had spent years crafting her image, curating her social media presence, and aligning herself with the right people. And yet, here was Thomas, a man she had initially dismissed, who seemed to embody everything she aspired to be: respected, admired, and unbothered by the pretentiousness that surrounded them. The music shifted to a slow melody, and couples began to dance, twirling gracefully across the polished floor. Claire felt an unexpected pang of vulnerability as she noticed the warmth radiating from the interactions around her. There was Thomas again, leaning in to listen to an elderly woman, his expression one of genuine interest. He had a way of making people feel seen, and Claire felt a twinge of envy. "Why does this bother me so much?" she whispered to Sarah, her voice barely audible above the music. "Because he's a reminder," Sarah said softly, "of what you're chasing. Perhaps it's time to ask yourself if what you want is worth the price you're paying." Claire turned away, unable to meet her friend's gaze. The heat of embarrassment washed over her as she began to question her own motivations. Was her relentless pursuit of status leaving her isolated, surrounded by people who only valued her for her connections? Moments passed, and Claire decided to gather her thoughts in solitude. She stepped outside onto the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her skin. She leaned against the railing, staring out at the garden illuminated by soft lights. The sounds of laughter and music faded into the background, replaced by the rustle of leaves. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Sarah, who joined her at the railing. "You okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "I don't know, Sarah," Claire admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've worked so hard to be someone important, but I feel empty." She looked down at her glass, swirling the golden liquid. "I keep thinking if I surround myself with the right people, I'll finally feel fulfilled. But I don't." "Maybe you need to redefine what fulfillment means to you," Sarah suggested gently. "It's not about who you know or how much money you have. It's about the connections you make and the impact you have on others." Claire sighed deeply, contemplating her friend's words. The realization was dawning on her, one that she had tried to suppress. She had been so focused on climbing the social ladder that she lost sight of what truly mattered: authentic relationships and kindness. As she turned to re-enter the ballroom, she caught sight of Thomas again, this time helping an elderly guest who had stumbled slightly. The compassion in his actions struck Claire, and she felt an unsettling shift within herself. She had spent the evening judging him for his role, and yet, he was displaying more dignity and grace than many of her so-called peers. "Sarah," Claire said suddenly, a newfound determination in her voice. "I think I need to talk to him." "Now?" Sarah asked, surprised. "Yes. I want to understand. I want to know why he seems so different from everyone else." With that, Claire stepped away from the balcony, her heart pounding as she made her way back into the fray of the gala. She was ready to confront not just Thomas, but the very ideals she had clung to for so long. The journey within her was just beginning, and she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps, through this unexpected encounter, she could find a path to something more meaningful. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted subtly. Claire watched, her heart racing, as the host of the gala, a prominent investor known for his strategic acumen and vast wealth, approached Thomas. The recognition in the investor's eyes sent a ripple of unease through her. She leaned slightly forward, her gaze locked onto the two figures amid the swirling crowd of high society. The investor's warm smile contrasted sharply with the glances Claire had received from her own friends, who were now whispering and pointing. "Thomas, my boy," the investor exclaimed, his voice booming above the soft murmur of the gala. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Your presence truly elevates this event." Claire's breath hitched. She felt a sudden flush of embarrassment mixed with disbelief. What does he mean by that? She thought, her mind racing. The investor's words resonated in the room, drawing the attention of other guests, their expressions shifting from casual indifference to curiosity. Claire could feel their eyes on her, as if they were judging her for the interaction unfolding before them. "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell," Thomas replied, his voice calm and steady, betraying none of the surprise Claire felt. "It's an honor to be here," the investor continued, his enthusiasm palpable. "I must say, the innovative ideas you brought to the table during our last meeting were nothing short of extraordinary. The potential of your startup is mind-blowing. The recent acquisition speaks volumes about your vision." Claire felt as if the floor beneath her had begun to tilt. Whispers cascaded around her, each one sharper than the last. "Did you hear that? The waiter is some kind of tech genius," one woman murmured to her companion, a mix of envy and intrigue in her tone. "Waiter? I thought he was just some lowly server," another chimed in, disbelief coloring her voice. The realization hit Claire like a cold wave. This man I tried to belittle, is not only my equal but far superior in intellect and achievement. The facade of superiority she had so carefully constructed began to crumble. The dazzling chandeliers above seemed to dim in comparison to the light of Thomas's accomplishments. As the investor continued to extol Thomas's virtues, Claire's stomach twisted in knots. She felt small, insignificant, and painfully aware of her previous arrogance. "Your insights on emerging technologies are what our firm needs right now," Mr. Mitchell continued, his praise unwavering. "I'm excited to see what you will do next." Claire's hands trembled slightly as she clutched a glass of champagne, the crystal feeling heavy in her grasp. She glanced at her friends, who now wore expressions of shock mingled with disdain. It was as if they were witnessing a slow-motion unraveling of her carefully curated social standing. The whispers grew louder, and the realization of her earlier condescension hung in the air like a bitter aftertaste. "What a revelation," Claire muttered under her breath, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as she replayed her earlier encounter with Thomas, the snide remarks, the thinly veiled derision. She felt a wave of shame wash over her, accompanied by a deep regret for how she had treated someone who, in reality, was a beacon of success and humility. As the gala progressed, the buzz around Thomas intensified, and Claire found herself increasingly isolated. The very people she had surrounded herself with now seemed to retreat, their eyes flickering away as if they were afraid of being implicated in her blunder. Claire felt the weight of their judgment, an invisible shroud that pressed heavily against her chest. She had entered the evening with the ambition to impress, to solidify her place among the elite. Yet, as she stood on the precipice of this unexpected revelation, She realized that her quest for status had led her to a profound misunderstanding of what true success entailed. With each passing moment, the divide between her superficial ambitions and Thomas's genuine accomplishments widened, and the clarity of her misjudgment stung like a sharp rebuke. As the applause erupted around her for Thomas, Claire felt a pang of loneliness settle deep within her. The crowd celebrated the man she had underestimated, while she grappled with the consequences of her actions. In that moment, she understood the fragility of her social aspirations, the hollowness of her pursuits, and the importance of authenticity over appearances. As the accolades for Thomas flowed through the air like a sweet melody, Claire felt the weight of her previous actions crash down upon her like an unforgiving tide. Her friends, once so eager to stand by her side at the gala, now subtly shifted away, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and judgment. It was as if an invisible line had been drawn, separating her from the very elite she had aspired to join. Claire's heart raced, not from excitement but from a growing sense of dread. She had been so consumed by her ambition that she failed to see the person standing before her. Thomas, amidst the flurry of compliments and admiration, stood composed, an unshakable calm radiating from him. His smile was genuine, and the respect he commanded from the crowd was palpable. Claire's jealousy twisted in her stomach, a cruel reminder of her own insecurities. She had sought to elevate herself through status and wealth, yet here was Thomas, a man she had underestimated, being celebrated for his intellect and vision. It was a harsh lesson, one that left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. In a moment of clarity, she realized that her desire for acceptance had clouded her judgment. She could no longer hide behind her designer gown or her carefully curated persona. Taking a deep breath, she stepped away from her friends and towards Thomas, her heart pounding in her chest. The noise of the gala faded into the background as she approached him, her mind racing with thoughts of how to express her regret. "Thomas," she began, her voice steady but laced with sincerity, "I need to apologize for how I treated you earlier. I was arrogant, and I underestimated you." The words flowed out, each one a weight lifted from her shoulders. Thomas turned to her, his expression one of calm understanding. "Apology accepted, Claire," he replied, his voice warm and inviting. "I appreciate your honesty. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong." His response caught her off guard, and she felt a flicker of admiration for him. His grace in the face of her previous condescension was humbling. "I've been so consumed with fitting in and proving my worth that I lost sight of what really matters," Claire confessed, her eyes searching his for a glimmer of understanding. "I thought status defined success, but I see now that it's about who you are and how you treat others." Thomas nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "True success isn't measured by wealth or position, Claire. It's about the impact we have on others' lives. You have the potential to make a difference, to connect with people on a deeper level." His words struck a chord within her, resonating with her desire for something more meaningful. Inspired by his perspective, Claire felt a shift within herself. She was ready to embrace change, to redefine her path. "I want to focus on social causes, to give back in a way that truly matters. I want to reconnect with my roots and the people I've lost touch with along the way," she declared, a newfound determination igniting within her. Thomas's smile widened, and Claire could sense his approval. "That's a wonderful decision, Claire. If you're serious about it, I would love to collaborate on a social initiative. I've been working on a project that aims to empower underprivileged communities through education and technology. Your skills in networking and outreach could be invaluable." Her heart swelled at the prospect. Here was an opportunity not only to make amends but to forge a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and purpose. "I would love that, Thomas. Let's make a difference together," Claire replied, her voice filled with excitement. As they began to discuss ideas for their collaboration, Claire felt a sense of liberation wash over her. No longer was she the woman defined by her ambition for status. She was evolving into someone who valued authenticity and connection. With every word exchanged, she felt the shackles of her former self loosen, replaced by a sense of purpose that was both exhilarating and profound. In that moment, amidst the glitz and glamour of the gala, Claire found herself on a new journey of self-discovery, one that promised fulfillment beyond the superficial trappings of wealth. Thomas, with his quiet strength and wisdom, had opened her eyes to the beauty of humility and the importance of genuine relationships. Together, they were set to embark on a path that would not only change their lives but also the lives of countless others, proving that true success lies not in what one possesses, but in the legacy one leaves behind. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with your friends and family, and help us spread these amazing stories.